There's been a growing trend in sports management towards more a team-oriented focus because increasingly it's becoming clear that in most sports, championships aren't won by individuals, they're won by teams. This has been true in soccer for a long time. What the math shows is that the contribution of an individual in soccer is actually relatively small. A team is better off with all good players as opposed to one great player and a bunch of mediocre players. Basketball is the sport where an individual has the greatest impact. But even there, you're starting to see a recognition that teams can win championships, that you can build a team around a strong, cohesive group as opposed to one superstar surrounded by a bunch of adequate players. I start here because I think if sport is making this realization, then it's way past time that video games come to the same conclusion. The interplay and interaction of video game development is so much more complicated than what occurs in a single game of any sport that the necessity of a cohesive team is critical. Any one individual is not going to be able to drag a dysfunctional team into making a great game. And I mean any member of that team, be it an incredibly talented artist or an amazing designer or the world's best programmer or the strongest, most charismatic leader imaginable. If the team isn't functioning, then it's not going to matter. Now, what you could say is that in the case of the leader, a leader can take a disparate group and can knit them together into a functional team. And this is absolutely true. I think truly these days, the role of the leader on a video game team is about bringing the team together, giving them a goal, but then allowing the team to carry the game on their backs as opposed to trying to do it entirely yourself. As teams get increasingly large, it's unrealistic to have a single person leading everything. The best vision, the most inspiring speeches don't get you very far if the leadership within the team is dismantling that. So leadership needs to be able to be distributed in larger teams because otherwise it is going to not be a functional team. You need to be able to handle more leadership than is possible for the bandwidth of a single person. So even in this area, it's about teams, not individuals. For me, a big part of leadership is about delegating the actual second-to-second work and focusing more on trying to make the team work. I wasn't always amazing at this, but I think that's the role. And I think when your teams get bigger and bigger, it becomes increasingly the role. There's no place for talented terrors or genius assholes in video game development because that's just a thorn in the team that's preventing it from acting cohesively, from being the best group as is possible. But don't forget that you get what you measure. So if part of your process of evaluating people is their individual performance, then you run the risk of having people who ignore the performance of their team, or even worse, potentially undermine the performance of their team in order to optimize for their individual performance, because that's what they see as going to be the thing that gets them ahead. So if you want team performance, you need to integrate that into your measurement process so that people are not simply measured on what they do as a person, but also what their team does is taken into account as well. When you look at salaries in corporate America, they don't really make a ton of sense from the perspective of the team being what matters. CEOs are paid hundreds of times more than individual workers. And I would argue that in very few cases are they providing hundreds of times of the benefit to the corporation as an individual worker. Now, there are cases where you have certain key individuals that provide almost the glue that holds the team together, but those may not be the people you think think they are. Those are people that are facilitators, are people that make the team around them better. As opposed to being amazing in their individual work, they may be the ones whose work is in the middle of the pack or even closer to the back, but the people around them work better when they're around. Those are the people that you need to be looking out for. I was going to talk about Moneyball in this video, but I realized as I'm talking that this isn't Moneyball. This isn't about finding people that have the attributes that you need and then kind of just throwing them into a blender and calling that a team. It's almost the opposite of this. It's about building a team around the people that can work together around a bunch of different voices that can bounce off of each other in different interesting ways, and then allowing that amplification that occurs from a highly functional team to bring the whole up higher. I've always been a big fan of weirdly shaped tools. I think I've mentioned this in a video before. I think that if you have someone who is a good fit in the team, able to interact well with the team, but has an odd set of skills, it is worth your while to figure out how to integrate them effectively into the team. I think it's worth spending a little time on something that's been niggling at me as I've been talking here. I think that for a long time in tech and in video games in particular, there was a lot of thinking about fit. And this video might sound like I'm really advocating towards hiring for fit. And I guess in a weird way I kind of am, but I would caution about the ways that fit is usually looked for, because often when companies hire for fit, what they're really hiring for is homogeneity, meaning they're hiring a group of people that are basically the same as each other. And that can result in a team that can definitely work really well together because they have the same opinions, they have the same beliefs, they have the same way of working. But it can have a really bad side effect if that's the way you're looking to build your team. Because what you're also getting is an echo chamber. You're getting a group of people who believe all the same things and agree on all the same points and all pull in the same direction. And you are losing out on a lot of different voices by hiring for fit in that way. Additionally, you are very, very likely to end up with a culture that rejects people who don't fit, that is ultimately toxic to people who aren't part of the echo chamber. And I would argue that a lot of the things that are coming to light in the video game industry right now are the result of very homogenous cultures that rejected in very, very toxic ways people that weren't like them, and is now having to come to grips with the fact that it had built, the entire industry has built this culture that isn't healthy, that is too focused on a single group of people and has been rejecting other points of view and other kinds of people for decades. Instead, I think what you should be looking for are people who are compatible with your team, whose personalities are not going to bounce out of the project, but not just hiring identical clones of the team you already have, because then all you're doing is making a bigger version of what you already have. You want a team that can disagree with itself, that can not be fully aligned on every single point, that can discuss and come to the best answer, not just the first answer because everyone is on exactly the same page. But in order for that disagreement to be useful, it has to be healthy disagreement. You need to have the structures, the norms in place to allow disagreement to happen in a healthy way. I don't necessarily have the best strategy for this, because always when you're interviewing for personality, your biases are going to sneak in there, because you're going to tend to favor people who are like you, who say things like you would say. And so this is always going to be a danger. But I think if you build a team culture that is about the team, about supporting the team, about bringing as many different voices forward as possible, then team fit becomes a lot easier because a lot of personalities can fit into that team. And really what you're then screening for are people who are going to have dangerous or destructive personalities, people who are going to have abrasive personalities, people who are going to damage the culture that you've spent the time to build. So rather than trying to interview for fit, you're interviewing to filter out the talented terrors and the genius assholes. And then you can integrate such a larger group of people into your team. And I think you'll be better off for it, because if you have a team that can pull together but in different ways and can unify without always agreeing with each other, that is what you want. So I guess actually at the end of the day, this isn't Moneyball, or at least not Moneyball as I understand it. This is something where you are focusing on team dynamic, focusing on the health of the group, and letting the whole be greater than the sum of its parts. This obviously requires great leadership, because different personalities are going to require different leadership styles and different ways of communicating vision and different forms of feedback. But again, I think that can come from the team as well. This shouldn't, nor can it, fall on a single individual. You need to build a leadership team that knows how to work together, that understands itself. And I think that's maybe my last point here, is that a team needs time to form, to figure out its norms, to understand what the different sounds coming out of the engine mean in order to fully work at highest possible efficiency. I think ultimately that might be one of the biggest mistakes that I made on Anthem, is I came from the Dragon Age team, where I had a core leadership team that I'd been working with for quite a long time, and went on to Anthem, where only one of the people in the core leadership team was someone that I had worked with. What I missed was that the noises coming out of that core team meant different things. What I was interpreting as we need to push harder was actually, in some cases, the opposite. We needed to slow down. And you need to give a team time to figure itself out. You need to figure out how to work as a unit. You can't just parachute in a single person onto a critical place on a team and expect everything to keep working as before. The team doesn't know how to work with that person, and that person doesn't know how to work with the team. It takes time for that to sort itself out. And unfortunately, in the case of video game development, time can be an entire project cycle. It's not a few months, it can be more than a year, and it might include the completion portion of a project. The Dragon Age team had the opportunity to work together and coalesce on Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age 2 is almost the perfect forge in which to form a team, because the goalposts are very clear, the end is very crisp, and it's about figuring out how to work together, cover each other's weaknesses, amplify each other's strengths, and figure out how to get the job done. We need to recognize that superstars are not where video games are, and maybe they're not where sports are either. And I know that we like to worship individuals. It's not individuals, it's teams. But stories about individuals are easier. They're easier to craft, they're easier to consume. It's so much simpler to believe in the genius of a single person as opposed to the hard work and interplay of a large group of people. So of course these stories continue. We elevate individual people to heights that aren't fully deserved, because that's what makes the best story. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. Right now, this channel is being run by me, but you know, the members and all of you also provide so much support, and I just think that even something like this, even this channel isn't an individual effort. It is the effort of a team. And I think in the West, we've become obsessed with the successful individual, even in cases where there is a massive support system behind them. If you found this video interesting, give it a thumbs up. That will help YouTube know what's going on. I will see you again soon. Thank you.